Hey there, Boots Owen here. It's a bit of an 8freight update video. So this will be number 3 in the series of 8freight restoration videos. I've done the welding with Ian Helsby. That's number 1, and I've just done a little bit of a repair on the back, so it's kind of ready for what kind of painting I'm going to do on it. So the Derailer hanger mount has been reapplied with epoxy. I'll clean up that drip later. I don't really mind cosmetic things. I'm more interested in functional, and we have an airplane going overhead, so hopefully he's not too loud. I've noticed that both of the threads, there's one underneath the clamp as well, they had helicoils fitted. So I presume the aluminium was stripped out. It's a stainless steel bolt, and I presume they over tightened it or hit it or something and pulled out and replaced it with helicoils. And one of the helicoils, that's like a thread insert to, when you strip the threads, you drill it bigger, tap it out, and then you put in this threaded insert. It's like a spring. You can just see it. You can see a thread in there, and it's a metal spring effectively, but a special shape to give you the profile of a metric thread in this case. And you screw it in with a special tool, but they'd left it proud on the one under here, and that would mean that it could never the bracket that fits on here, I think I have it in my pocket, the derailleur hanger that fits on there, it was always rocking, and of course it had to be, because you could never clamp it down properly because there was always something behind it pushing it out. So that'll solve that problem, hopefully. This is a neat little folded and welded stainless steel affair, and the critical part is that thread in there really. The rest of it you could rebuild, but getting the thread on there is the tricky bit. So that's back on. The pop rivets look a bit silly, but really all they do is hold it together while it's gluing. The glue should do all the work. So it's just araldite or 2-part epoxy. I noticed when I was buying the 2-part epoxy, I bought it in a hardware shop, and they had a different selection of things, different types of epoxies. One was epoxy for metal, and it was more expensive. So I asked to see the packet that was, general epoxy, and it was cheaper, like £5 versus £8 for the smaller size pack, which will last me years. The £5 pack on the back says, bonds leather and all the other stuff, and metal. So the metal one just has iron filings or some other compound in it to make it, I think just to make it grey, I don't know, but I used the cheap one. It's still araldite, it's still expensive, but I used the one that was more cost effective, which says metal on it, and the load that this is under is well, it's no great load. So I've got new bearings for the back. I'll fit them once I start work putting it back together, I think, but for now I'm going to have a think about painting it. We welded it up, and I'll give you a look at these welds. These are welds in aluminium by 2 people who have never used a TIG welder. Well, I've never used a TIG before, and Ian Helsby had never used a TIG on aluminium before. So we were basically learning and practicing. The bike seems to be coated with up to 1 millimeter of paint. Can you see it here somewhere? I don't know. There was blobs of it in different places. I think it's powder coated, but I'm not sure that it is really. So it had 10 cracks in it. It had 1 crack here, like completely cracked off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then we had to remount this bracket because it had been sheared, but it was just hanging on, so we remounted that. That was 11 or 12 welds, depending on how you look at it. And it had another crack. Oh, did it have cracking in here? It appears to have a crack in the paint just in there, but my one has cracks there, but I'm not as worried about that. It was tricky to weld because this pipe here is about 1 mil or less thick. Then this pipe here is maybe 2 mil, and it has inserts turned down for putting in plastic plugs. So the ends are turned down on the inside, bored out even, rather than turned down. And then it's covered in this thick layer of paint. So I'd sanded a lot of that back. Actually, is that a crack there? Oh, there is a crack there. That's a shame we didn't notice that. That's not great. So there is a crack in there. Just at my top above my fingernail there. This one had a little crack in it, I think, as well in the center. So that's what the extra blobs of weld are for. And none of it, some of it's elegant, but none of it is particularly, because this pipe here, as I said, was 1 mil thick. I think this is 3 or 4 mil thick. I think this is a scaffolding tube or something approximating that. And the whole bike really, from the front, from the back, all the way up to the steering head, takes its strength from this one tube. And then the steering head here has a bit of a fillet there to help it. 2 fillets, 2 little triangles of, what, 3 mil aluminium? And then all of this triangulation here is really just to give the rider something to sit on. The rest of it, like if you had just had handlebars and bottom bracket, you wouldn't really need a lot of the rest of it, because the bike was riding, as I showed in the last video, it was riding just fine without all of this metal that had fallen off or had been removed. So the issue was welding 3 or 4 mil massive pipe onto 1 mil pipe. You had to kind of put enough heat on to penetrate this, and then flick it across so that you didn't just blow holes in this. So we were running a weld like this here at about, I think, 30 amps. And then the other ones were up to 100 amps to get the heat into it. But we did it, and it's worked, and that's the main thing. Where you didn't grind off the paint, that really cooks the paint. But it's aluminium, so the paint is really cosmetic, and I'm kind of 2 minds as to what to do with this. I might just give it a rub over with wire wool, or, well, maybe not metal wire wool, stainless wool or something, or a stainless wheel. Clean it all up, and then see, this is what it'll go like in service. That's got a lot of wear on it there from whatever box was sat in it. So if I clean it up and just leave it, or clean it up and lacquer it, or I don't know what that's from, it's a big grind along the side, clean it up and just paint it with another color of paint to kind of show it as a war wound, because, you know, it's a real bike. There's some of the paint flaking off. It looks to have been sandblasted and powder coated, this model, I think, whereas I don't think my other one in here, I don't think this one was. The aluminium is a lot smoother all around, and the thickness isn't there. It's a black, this was a black one. I think the originals were black, whereas I was told that this one was a very late model of personally Burrows built bike. So it's all ready to be reassembled as it is, or cleaned up and painted as it is, now that I've done that epoxy. It'll take a while for this to dry, I think, because it's cold outside today. It's a little bit tacky. I should probably, this thing here, whatever's in there, probably needs a drop of epoxy as well. That's a mudguard mount, so that probably needs a drop of epoxy on it as well. I'll flip the frame over and do that later. I need as well, whether I do it or not, there's plastic inserts which I suspect are made out of gas pipe because of the colour, although they could be some type of plastic. I suspect he just cut lengths of gas pipe on the lathe and made them the way he wanted them to be. But there should be an insert here, and likewise here and here, but they got cooked whenever the weld was, whenever we were welding, they got cooked. And I don't know if these are things called bat wings. That's what I was told they're called. It's just a colloquialism, but they slide out to allow a wider load to be strapped onto the outside, and they come out quite a bit. But, you know, in service, they'll make your bicycle nearly 4 foot wide, which is, you know, chaos for a bicycle. And I'm not really sure what benefit they would bring. So maybe it's worth leaving them on, and for just as a bungee point, or maybe not. I don't know. or maybe they're good for things if you don't have, because I have a wooden infill all around, but maybe they're useful if you don't have the infill and you just have a bottom plate, which is what this one had. Maybe they're useful in that case, I'm not sure. So the welding here, it looks a lot worse. Well, that crack is a bit frustrating. The welding looks a lot worse because of the paint, so cleaning it up, even just cleaning it with the flap wheel, might be the way to go. Or the little file, the little electric file. It might be the way to go. There's one for sale, a Burrows on eBay, no, on Gumtree at the moment for 500 quid, which is really good value if you ask me. I would pay that all day long, except it's at the wrong end of the country for me to go and collect it. I think that's bonded in with epoxy as well into a cast unit here. So I think he got these cast up or made them himself maybe. Or maybe they're a standard part and then put aluminium tubes in to make the fork. Oh, and the front wheel is cracked. It needs a rebuild. If you see along there, there's a big crack in the rim going all the way around different bits. So I have the rim for it. It needs to be rebuilt, and that's a skill that I've done once. I did it on this bike. That's a whole other story. Well, I might as well tell you that story now because I'm in story time mode. When I was taking off this axle, you take out this one screw, the axle goes through, and you've already seen the problem if you've got a keen eye. The way to get it off is to drift the axle out. So to remove the derailleur hanger on the other side and all the other gubbins and drift the axle out, I decided it would be better to hit the tire this way and try and pull the tire off. And of course, the wheel was, I don't know, overstressed, and I was belting it with a lump of wood, and it broke this rim here, the rim of the hub, if that makes sense. It broke that rim and it broke this web here. So I got those professionally welded, and I would argue that the welds we've done are pretty much just as good. This was a guy who had, I don't know, decades of experience welding, and he welded it up and it's held, and that's, you know, that's a success. But it's cast, so he heated it up with a propane flame to get some heat into it first before he was welding it. And then afterwards he dunked it into a bath of water, which, as far as I know with castings, it's not the way to go. But he'd done it before I realised what he was doing. I was watching him, but he just walked out and then dropped it into a bath of water. Right, but it's held up, so I can't complain. Can't complain about that. It turns out that the other wheel, this is the one for the bike that I'm rebuilding, it has a crack in it there as well. I was told that that crack has been there for a long time and it hasn't made any difference. So maybe it doesn't make any difference. Maybe that's the answer to that crack. I don't know. So nasty welding, but none of it is particularly structural. I was told, actually, I think it was this weld here and this weld here, and maybe the two on the back. I don't think they came from the crash. I think it was crashed and it took out this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. So it wiped out the side of the tub. Whereas the other ones were already broken, because this one had a really weird, it was kind of overlapping in a weird way, as if it had been flapping around and rubbing off itself for a while. So, you know, the bike will ride as it is because of the main backbone. And the other detail was only possible, I think, on 2 or 3 of the joints. We put a little dowel, only about an inch long, inside, and I cut it to try and fit the profile, but because there was penetration of weld on the inside, it was very hard to get it in, but it was just enough to locate it and to act as a bit of a heat sink, so it made welding the thin tube a little bit easier. But welding tube is also tricky because you're never at the right angle unless you can spin the bike, and you know, it's 8 foot long, and we were doing it in the back of a high-topped van. But it turned out okay, and so the next stage will be either rebuilding it or it rebuilt. Still, I think I have a tub of yellow paint that's not this yellow, and this isn't. I think it's powder coating, so it's not really paint. But if I get off as much of it as I can, I could just tape it off and touch it up, so there are these little bandages of paint on it, just for looks really, nothing more. What do you think? How would you do it? I wonder if I put a bit of wet on my finger and just lick that up. Yeah, just blend in that drip there, leave some fingerprints on the bike. That'll do. No, that one's gone a bit far. I'll have to chip that off. But Epoxy resin's quite fun to work with. I've used it in other situations that weren't really gluing situations, like a mastic kind of situation, where you don't want the I've used it on concrete as a kind of a mastic, and it worked before as a sealant. You just mold it into place with a paintbrush very, very carefully, and then it spreads as it dries. It's quite cool stuff. Right, 8freight. That's 15 minutes of me rambling. The bottom bracket's okay, seat post's okay, front steering's okay, front wheel needs a rebuild. Maybe I should look at the brakes. I've got new bearings for it, I've got a new chain for it. I haven't got a new chain wheel for the front, but I have a new derailleur and sprocket set for the back. I think that it has a grip shift over here. I think the grip shift is knackered, but I'm not sure if it's knackered or not. So I've got new rubbers for it that came with the bike, but I don't know if the thing itself is bad, so I might need to replace that. I think all the cables were fine, so you know, it's really just a rebuild job, and I have nearly all the parts apart from that twist grip, which is not critical at the moment. And then it's a question for me of what type of box to put in it. It came with a flat plate, which I don't really like because things will fall out, whereas with this design you can keep things up at the front, and even though there's some holes there and there, little screws don't really fall out. You need to have it with this kind of angle on it because your heels otherwise will clip it, and even at that 2-inch gap there, it's still close enough that if you're starting off and you're not ready for it, it can catch your heel. Originally I made this square, so it came out to about there to get the most box out of it. Just tore your heels off if you were wearing trainers that catch underneath. It was really sore. really sore, but I changed it. I changed that. I think the Burrows one actually came forward quite a bit and was catching my heels, so I kept that piece of timber in there somewhere, but it's behind a cupboard or something, somewhere safe. So this one, anyways, I think it's ready to go, ready to be tidied up. What do you think? Progress is coming along. Thanks again to Ian Helsby. There's channel memberships available, and we're up to quite a few members now. By my reckoning of, I was aiming for 0. So there's quite a few members there, and they'll get to see the video ahead of other people by a few days typically, depending on the video. So it's worth subscribing anyways, that's free. If you want to be a member, it's there from just £1, and you can spend kind of as much as you want. Or if the video's been helpful, or if other videos are helpful, put it on PayPal. One way or the other. There's no private videos, so you'll get to see everything eventually. Thanks for watching. See you later.